Welcome to the Motivational Midwife. My name's Lynn Jones, and today we're going to be looking at the reproductive system and the reproductive cycle. So let's take a look at the female reproductive system and the reproductive cycle, and we're going to do it quite systematically. So we're going to look from the outside in, and then there are some diagrams that might help cement it a little bit better in your head. It's useful to learn it in quite a systematic approach, particularly when you think about vaginal examinations, because when you are documenting a vaginal examinations, and I know a lot of trusts now have electronic documentation where wizards are used, and it becomes very much a tick box exercise, but you should really be thinking, if I had to write this out longhand, what elements do I really need to write down? And we'll go into vaginal examinations in more depth in another session. So let's look at what the external genitalia really consists of. So your external genitalia really is your vulval area, and the vulval area is made up of your mons pubis, so that's the sort of fatty bit that's in front of your pubic bone. The labia majora and minora and the clitoris make up the whole vulval area. And if you're not really sure about that, get a mirror, have a look at your own vulval area and see if you can identify all these different areas. You'd be surprised actually at how unfamiliar women and girls are with their own bodies. Then you have the vagina, working our way inwards, and the vagina is an amazing piece of kit. We are extraordinary as women and what our bodies can do, and it's located between the urethra, so where we expel urine from the body, and the rectum, where we expel feces. And it's an elastic muscular tube which has three functions. One, it will facilitate menstruation, so it will allow that menstrual flow to leave the body. Two, it will distend to allow intercourse. And three, it will distend to allow the birth of a baby. And women get very worried, and men get very worried, because they think it's going to stretch out of all proportion and it's never really going to go back. And it's designed to do the job that it is. It's designed to do those three functions. The body is very, very clever. And I love how when I did my hypnobirth training many years ago, I love how Catherine Graves actually explains how the vagina does this to parents, and she very much likens it to the coastlines of America and Norway. And the vagina has lots of little folds that really just distend and unfurl to allow the baby to be born. And so she really likens this to the coastway of Norway, which is a very small country, has lots of little fjords and lots of little inlets. And when you look at the distance of that coastline, it actually equates to just over 21,000 kilometres. Excuse me. And then she speaks about America, very big country, and the actual coastline of that equates to about 19,000 kilometres. So you can see how the smaller country, but with all those little inlets, actually has a much bigger overall coastline. Just useful if you want to explain to parents how the vagina does its job. Then you'll hit the cervix. If you were doing a vaginal examination, the cervix would be the next thing you would be coming into contact with. And the top part of it projects into the upper part of the vagina, so we would be able to feel it if we were examining her. And the uterus then is, for most women, a pear-shaped organ, although there are variations on this, and it's situated between the bladder and the rectum, and it's said to be anteverted, so that means it leans forward, and anteflex, which means it's folded forward on itself as well. And non-pregnant weighs about 50 grams and can facilitate about 10 mils of menstrual blood. Then you have your fallopian tubes, which at the end they've got these fimbriae, which are really sort of like wave-like projections that help the ovum into the fallopian tube. And then you've got the ovaries. And really, as women, we are born with a finite number of eggs. We don't have an infinite supply. And really, when the fetus is about 20, female fetus this is about 20 weeks, there's 10 million primary oocytes just sitting there. And the oocyte is the term given to the unfertilized egg. So there's about 10 million there. By the time we hit birth, we're looking at sort of 250,000, and by the time we hit puberty, there are less than 200,000, and they continue to degenerate throughout our life. So the older we get, the less we have, and this is why it sometimes can be a challenge for older women to conceive. So looking at this picture, you can see everything in a little bit more detail. So your external genitalia is this area here. So here's your mons pubis, and then your clitoris is there. And then here we have the labia minora, so that's the smaller flaps, for want of a better word. And then the labia majora is the larger ones. You can see the urethra here, and the bladder, and the rectum here, and then here's the vagina in between them. So you can see if you've got a baby's head sort of here, and this bladder is full and really distended, it's going to stop that baby's head coming down. And likewise, as that baby's head is coming down, it's going to squash this rectum here, and any feces that are in there are going to come out. And many, many women are very, very anxious about really having a poo in labour. They're very worried about it, and as midwives we tend to get quite excited about it because it generally means that there's that baby is advancing, and so we get very excited, they get very embarrassed about it. And you have to sort of develop a ninja-like quality that you can dispose of anything that does happen to make an appearance as quickly and unobtrusively as possible. But it's worth having that conversation antenatally with women so that they know that, this is a part of normal progress of labour, and nothing to be anxious about, and that midwives will be really very sensitive to it. So here as well is the cervix, if you can see it here, projecting into the top part of the vagina. And then you can see here the uterus, which is leaning forward and bent forward, with the ovary and the fallopian tubes above it. So this is one of the potential abnormalities that you can sometimes see in a uterus, and obviously you can't always see that unless it's a sort of cesarean section, or it's sometimes picked up on scans. This is what's called a septum, so it's like a divider that's in the uterus. And then here we have a normal uterus at the top and what's called a bicornate uterus. So the horn part of the uterus is very much more exaggerated, and sometimes you can get a baby sort of developing in one part but not necessarily in the other. And there are sometimes as well, there are some women who actually have two cervixes, which is a challenge. And then let's not forget, part of that reproductive system is there's also the mammary glands, and they're located in the breasts, about 15 to 25 lobes there. Both sexes have mammary glands, but actually they're only functional in females. And their main function, of course, is the production of and secretion of milk. And in pregnancy, they are very much acted upon by the pregnancy hormones. So let's look then at the reproductive cycle, and that's broken up into 3 different phases, which kind of all happen. So first of all, you've got your ovulatory phase, then the hormonal, and an endometrial or menstrual phase. So let's look at the first one. So your ovulatory phase is the first day of the cycle. The estrogen levels are low, and the progesterone levels are stimulating the hypothalamus. Okay, you get gonadotrophic stimulating hormone being released, and that will stimulate the anterior pituitary gland, so that's up in the brain, and that releases follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And those high levels of follicle stimulating hormone will trigger that development of the little follicle in the ovary. And then you get once mature, you'll get a real spike in that luteinizing hormone, which causes the ovary to just sort of burst open and release the ovum. And that it's initiating ovulation. And then what's left is your corpus luteum. So if there's no fertilization, it just degenerates and goes back away again. But it will start excreting progesterone if there is fertilization. So the hormonal aspect of our reproductive cycle, those increased levels of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, they stimulate that follicle to really grow. They also stimulate estrogen to be secreted. Estrogen peaks just before ovulation, and so often it's these kits that for women that pick up when they're ovulating, often it is looking at things like this. And this peak in estrogen causes a spike in the luteinizing hormone, and that's what causes the ovulation. Once that's happened, those levels decline, and say if the corpus luteum is there, progesterone and estrogen are secreted from that, and the levels really just decline as that corpus luteum degenerates. And then endometrial. Okay, so this is looking really at the lining of the uterus. So the endometrium, or the inside lining, is receptive to implantation of that fertilized ovum for a very, very short period of time. Okay, so the first 5 days of the cycle it's shedding the functional layer. Okay, the deepest layer stays intact. And by day 6, we've got lots more estrogen floating around, so it starts that proliferative phase, so that sort of growing phase. After ovulation, which in somebody with a 28-day cycle is usually around day 14, that increased progesterone level will trigger a secretory phase, so that it becomes much more receptive to implantation, and the most receptive is 7 days after that initiation of ovulation. Okay, and so if fertilization happens, all the other hormone levels will change and increase. If not, all the hormone levels will start to drop and menstruation will occur. And there you have it, the reproductive system. I hope you found that interesting and useful. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so, and look out for us on Facebook under The Motivational Midwife, and I look forward to seeing you next time.